Good evening, and welcome to New Foundation Unity. This is our third in the series of the Lessons Journey to the Promised Land. If you're having any technical difficulties, call Mark at, email Mark at truthunity.net. And the phone number here for later on, when we have questions and answers and comments, is 816-301-6304. And one announcement, and I'll make it again at the end, is that next week have to take a break because of a Passover Seder Maundy Thursday service, but we'll return for 3 more Thursdays after that. So as we begin our time together, I invite you to close your eyes, turn within, and experience that silence at the center of your being. In the silence, I am one with the infinite power of God. In the silence, I am one with the infinite wisdom of God. I am one with the infinite love of God. I am one with God's infinite storehouse of all good, the source that is within us. And for a few moments in the silence, let us rest in that awareness that we are always provided for. See the infinite possibilities in the silence. I am one with the source of all good. And as we begin to return our attention to this time and this place, we give thanks that we carry with us at all times that source of good, the source of guidance, the source of healing, the source of abundance, the source of all good. And for an awareness of that truth, we are so grateful, and we give thanks in the name and through the power of that living Christ within us all. Amen. Last week, we left the Israelites at Sinai. They had been through many challenges, and they came at last to Sinai, which is another name for Horeb, where Moses encountered that burning bush, the presence of God, where he received his call to go and free the Israelites. A journey to the promised land is a journey that we are all on. There are always two forces active within us until we get there. That built-in impulse to grow and to change and to seek God's presence. It is, after all, the will of God to express in and through us. And so that is a natural impulse, and we are scheduled, each one of us, to wake up at a particular time of readiness. And the other voice is that voice of the personal ego, which feels threatened at losing control, and so will try to pull us back into the old, comfortable, even though miserable situation. Remember how the Egyptians, after they had agreed to let them go, tried to chase after them. So we have those two voices within us all the time, and each time the Israelites encountered a challenge, they would call to Moses, and Moses would seek guidance from the Lord of his being that is within us. And each time the particular situation was resolved. And you think, oh, every time they meet a challenge, they start whining again, which is true, but we know that some growth has taken place because along the way, they discover new names for God, indicating that they understand that God functions in ways that they are now open to experiencing. And so last time we had Jehovah Rapha at the place where the waters of the swamp of Marah, where the waters were bitter, and the tree was shown to Moses. He threw it into the water that sweetened those bitter experiences of life, and he was instructed to this new name. He was instructed about this new name, Jehovah Rapha. I am the God that heals you. And then they had more. They had the manna and the quail. No food, but God provided. But then they got to the battle with the Amalekites. And you remember how that got solved with Moses on the top of the hill, Joshua fighting the battle, Moses sitting on top of the hill, raising the rod of God. That's spiritual authority. And when it's up, the Israelites win. When Moses gets tired and lets his arms droop, the Amalekites win. And so Aaron and Hur go up on the mountain. Aaron on one side, Hur on the other. Aaron representing the will, her, that radiant light representing affirmation, faith, and they hold his arms up until sundown. And the Israelites win the battle. Okay. So the message for us is that when we encounter difficulties that feel overwhelming, and we feel so weary that we can't maintain that spiritual consciousness, that awareness of truth, then it's okay to call on, quote, the elders of Israel. That is, people who are grounded in truth. You can call on those helpers to get you through a particular circumstance. They can pray with you, they can affirm with you, and sustain you, and restore your willingness to move on through that. So after that, they came to this beautiful oasis, you remember? And the next step is what we're going to talk about tonight, which is probably for the religion of Judaism, the particular passage in the Bible, that in the Torah, that is most significant, which is the giving of the law, which we know as the 10 Commandments. One other point, we had a question at the end of the last session about the relationship between Aaron and Moses, because they are brothers, which means they have a close relationship. Moses represents an understanding of the law. Aaron represents the executive will. And so will and understanding, that relationship, and they both exist within us. So it's not one or the other, but they're both there, active and present in different times. So the giving of the law, this is the foundation of Judaism. It's like the constitution for the nation of Israel. The 10 Commandments are also called the Decalogue because there's 10 of them. And we're going to look at them in terms of the spirit, the soul, and the body. Now, you may not know that books have spirit, soul, and body, but they do. Just as we are spirit, we express through a soul or consciousness. Where's my diagrams? I have diagrams tonight to show you. Okay, just a refresher of this is called the Trinity of Man. We are spirit, we express through a soul or consciousness, and that is thinking and feeling, intellect and intuition, subconscious and conscious, and through these two, thinking and feeling, we form and shape the experiences in our bodies, in our circumstances, and in our life generally. And so the expression, we express through the soul, which then builds the body. So if you want to know what you're thinking and feeling, look at the circumstances in your life and the condition of your body. So keep that in mind, because the same spirit, soul, and body exists in the commandments. The first three, and we'll go more deeply into this in just a moment, but just so you get an overview, the first 3 commandments are the spirit, because they deal with our relationship to God. All right, first 3 commandments, which no other gods before me, no graven images, do not take the name of the Lord in vain. These first three, all about our relationship to God. The next two, the number of the soul, thinking and feeling. We have two that relate to that. Honor the, remember to keep the Sabbath. Remember to keep the Sabbath holy. And honor your father and mother. So we'll talk about those two in a way that we can relate that to our own lives. And the last 5 through 10, relate to body or behavior. Don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't bear false witness, in other words, don't lie, and don't covet. All right, so you may take a look, some people take a look at these 10 commandments, they just kind of blow them off because, we think, oh, well, I know enough not to murder anyone. Certainly I don't steal things, and so on. And yet, when we go to the deeper levels of this, we find that, like these Israelites, we violate every one of these commandments all the time. In fact, someone who has done a study of the first 9 books of the Bible said that step by step, the Israelites have violated every single one of these commandments. And we'll see. And there are questions that we can ask ourselves to see where we are in terms of these commandments. Okay, so Moses meets God on Mount Sinai. And this is an attempt on the part of the Israelites to make the punishment fit the crime. It's not the earliest code of law by any means. There was the Hammurabi, earlier code of law, which was, if somebody pokes your eye out, you have the right to poke his eye out. Kind of eye for an eye, the literal eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. There's a covenant. This is the second, not the second. It is the third covenant made to the Israelites so far. We had Noah. All right, there was a covenant with Noah and a sign of the covenant, which was the rainbow. We had a covenant with Abraham. The sign was circumcision. And now we have a covenant with Moses. Okay. Obey the law and you will be blessed. And one of the most important signs is this Sabbath. All right? The Sabbath. Now the Sabbath has a different meaning than simply a day of rest, because we can't even agree on what day it is, all right? Some say Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's obviously not a day in the literal sense of the word. So let's look at the commandments, starting with number 1, and know that within each commandment there is a spirit, soul, and body. So different layers here. So let's look now at commandment number 1. Which is this. You shall have no other gods before me. Okay. So God is omnipresence. There is no opposite to God. Although in our own lives we do worship God and something else. We do believe in health and sickness. We do believe in abundance and lack. But the first commandment, which is, if you get this one, you've got the whole thing, that there is only God. And that whereas when we look through our senses and judge by appearance, we see, we take that to be a reality as much, if not more, than the power and presence of God within us, which is there to overcome the difficulties. Now, God is not a thing. God is not a person. But God is a principle. All right? And so there's this principle of oneness, which is the basis of the entire religion. And Jesus is the one who fulfills this law. He demonstrates what it looks like when this law is fulfilled. When he says, I and the Father are one. All right, so let's look at the body of this commandment, which is simply, don't look to other gods. Think of all the other gods with a small g that we can have. It can be a concept, it can be a person, it can be a belief system, it can be money, it can be a relationship, anything that has more power in our awareness and in our thinking and decision making than the power and presence of God. All right. So, then you can ask yourself, how do I make decisions? Do I look out here or do I look in here? Okay. They worshipped idols in the tribes around Israel, and so the literal interpretation of this is, don't worship other gods. Idolatry is one of the big sins in Judaism. The soul level of this is your relationship. Okay, soul is about relationship between thinking and feeling. Your relationship to God is everything, and there's only one power and one presence. So thinking and feeling, when they are harmonious and unified, that provides a channel for the Spirit to move through you. Remember the wedding at Cana. Okay. So that's the soul level. And the spirit level, you can find, this is found in Mark 12:29-30, where someone is asking Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? Now, he was trying to trick Jesus. And Jesus said, quoting Deuteronomy, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And the second is like unto it," and this is quoting Leviticus 19:18, "you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Okay, know your oneness with God. Who's your neighbor? Everyone is your neighbor. All right. Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself, love all of life. Know your oneness with all life. So that is the fulfillment of that commandment. When you know your oneness, not just your oneness with God, because if you know if you say you know your oneness with God, but you're at war with other people, then you do not know your oneness with God. Okay. All right. So the second commandment. And if you have questions along the way, just make a note of them, and we'll address questions, when it gets to be about 8 o'clock. The second commandment, you shall not make for yourself a graven image. Why? Because no one can see with the physical eyes. No one can see God. All right. So no graven image. To worship anything is to consider it divine. So it's totally foolish to worship anything in form rather than in the substance from which it is created. All right. So we don't make a form or a shape of anything. And it's like really total in Judaism. So you don't make a graven image. And it says, in heaven, that is within your own mind. In earth, that's the physical outer world. In the water under the earth, that's your emotional nature. And it goes on to say, I am a jealous God, which is a mistranslation. It should say zealous. Okay. Zealous, meaning impassioned. And if we fail to recognize that one power and one presence, then we receive negative experiences as a result. And then it says that we are visited with the iniquity of the fathers. Who are your fathers? You are the father of your tomorrow. Okay. The thoughts that you think today are the father of your experiences tomorrow. And to the third and fourth generation, that would be through time, space, and form. So until it fully manifests as a negative experience. And it could be a sickness, or it could be in any area of life. Okay. So what we set in motion, we talked a little about this last week, but the law of mind action, you know that at some point the law of mind action is set in motion. It then brings back, it reaps the reward. You reap the rewards or consequences of that, and you may not even remember when it got set in motion. And so we become very mindful of our thinking process. We become very mindful of our attitudes, and we don't carelessly make decisions or take action. Okay. So that law of mind action, it will move through that trinity of time, space, and form until the errors of the belief are fully expressed. Okay, so let's look at the body of this. Now, don't worship outer things, all right? We don't make idols, we don't carve statues of foreign gods, right? So that's what they understood it to be. And on the soul level, you know that in your thinking and feeling that if you do worship something out there, there is no fulfillment. You know, if you go after something and make, let's say, money your God or a relationship your God, everything out here is changing. All right. So God is eternal principle that never changes. So there's no power in anything but God. That's the soul level. And then for the spirit level, Jesus tells us, and this is a quote from Matthew 6:24, this is the Sermon on the Mount, "No one can serve two masters." Okay, we can't worship God and something else. "For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." So remember the source, to worship only the source. Okay, that's commandment number 2. Commandment number 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Okay, falsely. That means falsely. And in those times, biblical times, they would use the name of God in bargaining. And they would swear by the name of God that this was how much they paid for something, and they used that as a bargaining tool to get the price down. And the merchant would do the same thing, and he would say, "I swear by the God of blah, 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 that this is how much I paid for it, and I'm not cheating you." All right. And Jesus says, don't swear at all. And when it says the name of the Lord your God, Charles Fillmore says the Lord of the Old Testament is the Christ of the New. The Lord is the I am, or Christ within you, that individualized expression of God. And whatever you connect your I am with, you are doing in the name of God. In other words, you're using your divine energy to support something false. Okay, so looking at the body first, don't swear. Okay, that's the literal. That's how people take it literally. Don't swear. Watch how you speak about God. And remember, the only sin, blaspheming against the Holy Spirit. Right? The only unforgivable sin. And on the soul level, this is something we all know, is that we have to watch how we use the I am. So if we say, I am tired, or I am broke, or I am, any of those other things that are just like habitual things, we don't even think about the structure of the language, then what we are doing, we're saying that God is tired. God doesn't get tired or have these human conditions. And the spirit level is, how did Jesus use the I am? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. In other words, your way to God's presence is through the I am. So don't attach it to anything less. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So these 3 commandments, these first 3 commandments, form the spirit portion of the 10, and they are concerned with your relationship to God, both as this transcendent power, principle, divine mind, and as an individualized presence. which is the I am. Okay, so part 2, the soul. And you may be familiar with the quote from Emmett Fox, which is, "Life is consciousness." What does that mean? It means the degree to which you experience God's presence is according to consciousness. All right? You can look out here and you say, God's presence? I don't see God's presence. I don't feel God's presence. My life is, you know all those things that we say. But as we grow in an awareness of the truth, in an awareness of the law, we realize that even if we don't experience anything, that we know that God's presence is there. And that's the starting point. God is active and present at all times. And if we know that, we will be guided and directed in ways that we never would be just looking out here for God. So, on the first one, this is commandment number 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And so, I'm going to remind you that, as I said, the Sabbath has nothing to do with the day of the week. It has nothing to do with work. And so I'll show you this diagram, totally one of my favorite. You've seen it before. Okay, and what this shows is, if I can talk and show it at the same time, that the Sabbath is in the silence of our being. And when we go into our inner chamber and close the door to the outside world, that allows the divine ideas to come in. Now, this door is always open, but when this one is closed, the divine ideas come down into the subconscious, purify the subconscious, and then that divine idea becomes part of our conscious awareness. All right. If we never go into the silence, then we are taking our notion of reality from the outside world. This is a true Sabbath. So it's that moment of transcendence where God is working fully in and through us. Okay. So this door always open. This one needs to be closed if we're going to become more aware of that power and presence within us. So remember each day to keep it holy. Be very vigilant in honoring your spiritual practice. The Sabbath was an ancient symbol of conscious silence and willing stillness. Because in silence we find the true source of power. Charles Fillmore says the only source of power is in the silence, and the only source of strength is being still. Remember, fear not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord. Yeah. Okay. We have the capacity to turn our attention outward or inward. Okay? That's why the soul is called pivotal. The structure of the soul is eternal, but the consciousness grows. And as it grows, we look more inward than outward, and we continue that practice until the inner presence has more power over us than the pulls of the outer world. Okay, makes sense? All right. So if we look at the body level of this commandment, and many people do this, it's just take time and relax. All right? So you can take a day of rest. And on the soul level, obviously, that's what I was just talking about. Take time to go within and experience the source. Jesus said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. It was one of those commandments that the Hebrews took quite literally and had a whole list of rules, that things you could not do on the Sabbath. And I think there are still people who have a literal Sabbath. Okay. On the spiritual level, Jesus said, there is one Father who dwells within me that does the work. It is not I, but the Father within that does the work. Does God take a Sabbath? Do the laws of the universe get suspended 1 day a week? No. So God is always working, and it is that power and presence within me that is doing the work. But we have to be still. Okay. So in other words, we are here to be co-creators, and that's the way we do it. We become still and allow the power to come through us, through that stillness. That's 4. Now, 5. Honor your father and mother. Okay. So, who are your parents? God is the true father and mother of all of us. In Unity, we used to pray, Father, Mother, God. Haven't heard that recently. But God in the masculine represents wisdom and power, and God in the feminine represents love and understanding. Remember, male and female, we are all created male and female. And it has nothing to do with the gender of our bodies. Okay. So we have that polarity reflected in our thinking and feeling. Also conscious and subconscious. And it's the union of thinking and feeling that forms and shapes the circumstances of our lives. Okay, so on the level of the body, honor your physical origin. On the soul level, knowing that consciousness is formative, watch those thoughts and feelings and see where you are. Take an inventory there. And Jesus said, one second here, Jesus said, quote, and this is from Matthew 19:29, and every man who leaves houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or fields for my name's sake shall inherit everlasting life. And do you remember at the crucifixion, Jesus said, who is my mother and brother? All those who honor that relationship to God over any relative relationship or fields and over any relative pursuit. Okay, indicating that inner relationship between thinking and feeling really determines the quality of life that we have. Okay. Now, the last five, this is life and physicality, the body, and number 6, commandment number 6 is, you shall not kill. Okay, you shall not kill. Now, you cannot kill eternal life, but there are other forms of killing which are much more insidious. People have their dreams killed, their spirit squashed. Anything on the fine feeling level is more devastating than harm to the physical body. We can have these murderous thoughts against people. If you've ever experienced really strong negative energy coming at you, you will know the effects. Strong judgments. You know, if somebody tells you you are really stupid, or you are really, something like that, that's a form of murder. Okay. In those days, do not kill applied only to Israelites and only to Israelite men. Okay. However, Charles Fillmore says that as long as we kill animals, we will always have war, which is one of the reasons he became a vegetarian. Okay. So on the bodily level, obviously, do not harm others. You get put in jail if you assault someone or if you kill someone. And on the soul level, in Matthew 5:21-22, Jesus says that if you anger your brother, you shall be liable. If you're angry at your brother, you shall be liable to judgment. So a subtler level of killing is anger. Spirit, so don't hold murderous thoughts. Spirit, well, judge not and you will not be judged. Okay, that's one of those boomerangs. And the measure you give out will be the measure you give back. So that's what you shall not kill at different levels means. Adultery. All right, 7. Do not commit adultery. Adultery has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with an error in thinking and feeling. It's when we mix our emotion with something other than a divine idea. So we can attach negative emotions to anyone or to anything or to ourselves. And then we can ask ourselves, where is my feeling attached? Is it attached to having something negative happen to someone? Is it attached to a negative feeling I have about someone? Adultery, and this is one of those plays on words, Charles Fillmore, is idolatry. Okay. Adultery and idolatry. What we hate, we worship in a negative way. You've heard that book, You Cannot Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought, because it is formative. We have to keep in mind that our thoughts, fueled by our emotion, those are formative. So, body level, keep your relationships harmonious. It's better to be harmonious than it is to be right. Soul, you cannot afford negative emotional attachments. And on the spirit level, and this is from Matthew 5:28, Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, "But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman," that's an attitude or a feeling, "lustfully has already committed adultery." Okay. Number 8. You shall not steal. Actually, you really can't steal because you can't get your good at another's expense. You cannot steal anything because you won't be able to keep it unless you have the consciousness of a thing. Unless you have a prosperity consciousness, you won't be able to hold on to the things that you have taken without giving for. Okay. We can't claim credit for something that is not ours. We cannot have what we are not able to give. Okay. So you can't give love without being loving yourself. Right? We can only appropriate from the source which is within us by developing the consciousness that allows us to contain our good. And then we can affirm its presence and give thanks in advance. So on the body level, that's do not try to appropriate another's property. Quite literally, don't steal things. Soul, what is yours by right of consciousness. And Matthew 6:33, spiritual level, what does Jesus say? Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. You shall not bear false witness. That means don't tell lies about other people. Don't make false judgments. And that is, don't judge people except in the way that you are willing to be judged yourself. And on the level of the body, speak the literal truth. Okay? Don't tell lies. Soul, speak the spiritual truth. All right? And spirit, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5:37, but let your words be yea, yea, and nay, nay. Yes or no. Yes, this serves my spiritual growth. No, this does not. Yes and no. And in the Lumps of Bible, it says, because anything else will be a deception. Okay. There's nothing on the fence here. Either something serves you or it does not serve you. So that's bearing false witness. And finally, 10, you shall not covet. Covet is a form of lust. This is when you want to be what you think you aren't, and then you compare yourself unfavorably to other people. So there are some examples of how we do that. House, don't covet your neighbor's house. That is, don't covet the consciousness of another. You can develop your own. You have access to the same source as everyone else. covet your neighbor's wife. You want to love the things that he does. Manservant, you want to think like him. Maidservant, you want to feel the things he does. The ox, you want to look like he does. And ass, same desires that he does. Those are all the different ways that we covet. We covet other people's talents or status or homes, or even just using some person as the pattern for your own life. And there is only one perfect pattern, which unfolds in a perfect way through each one of us. And so to covet is really to negate God as expressing in and through you. All right? Okay. So on the body level, it's like, don't covet anyone else's life. You are in your perfect, right and perfect place, going through the perfect experiences that are perfect for your growth. That's hard to see sometimes. And on the soul level, you cannot, it's not allowed. You cannot use someone else as the pattern for your life. And what does Jesus say? He who has seen me, and me meaning the Christ, has seen the Father, because the Christ is the perfect pattern, the image likeness of God. That's found in John 14:9 and Matthew 5:33 and 34. And so with that, we have traveled full circle, and once again, we are at the first commandment, have no other gods before me. So there's only one pattern for your life, and that is the Christ. All right. So I know that was a lot of information, but it is 8 o'clock, and so first let me ask you too, if there's anything that isn't clear or anything you want to comment on or ask a question about.
Commandment number 6 talks about damage to fine feelings.
Yes, murder. Okay.
On the fine feeling level.
Uh-huh.
And it seems like, and you said that damage to a fine feeling level is worse than physical damage.
Well, it leaves an impression in the subconscious that is difficult to process, and so it's carried on. Yes.
But it sounds, that calls for one who has been damaged. When we look at ourselves and we know that we've been hurt on a fine feeling level, it may cause some of these other things to come up. And either being angry with what we perceive as the source of the damage, or coveting what we should have been. It just seems like they get, maybe it's because they're all spirit, but they seem to be a little confused, or not confused, a little, one refers to another. And
they're all commentary.
Yeah.
Number 1 is the only
one that's
all right. All the rest come about as a result of the violation of the first commandment. So on number 6, her question for those of you out there was about number 6, which is you shall not kill. Where's my paper? And you shall not kill means that when you say something hurtful to someone else, you are projecting a negative onto that person that person then carries around in his or her subconscious, and that is a form of killing. I've heard from psychologists that children who have been emotionally abused suffer more than those who have been beaten physically. All right? That parents unknowingly sometimes say things, implying that the child is stupid or slow, or, and children don't know how to process that, and they carry around these impressions in their subconscious. And so that's why, on a soul level, we need to be sensitive to how we view other people, because we are all one. We are all children of God, and there are ways of addressing these hurt feelings other than allowing them to get into our cell tissue and manifest as an experience. Because, it's all about remembering that there's one source. Now, it sounds simple, and it's almost, well, yeah, I believe in one source. But when we look at all the different aspects of life, we realize all the times when, oh, yeah, I think I was believing in God and just a little bit of lack here. Or, we are still in a state of duality where we take all these impressions from the outside, from race consciousness, not always from just parents and teachers, but the whole collective consciousness has really insidious beliefs that we take on as part of consciousness that does not serve our spiritual growth. And here's one way. I'll tell you, really, the safe way to address this is right here. Because here, you can go into your inner chamber, you can close the door, allow those thoughts to come up as they will do, and they do no harm in the context of the silence. They are purified. That's how we deal with all of these violations. Because this is the practice that supports our understanding of there being only one. That number one is not an easy one by any means, because it always looks like there's more than one, as there is in the outer world. But the more you contact the source within you, the more you see and feel and experience that there is only one. And, excuse me. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Eleanor. I can't see that chart you're holding up. Is it superconscious, conscious, and subconscious?
Yes. The chart that shows the process of going into the silence when we close this door.
Right, okay.
Okay. That's how we can experience. Thank you.
Is that better?
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay, you have a job, Adine. Okay.
But when
In relationship to what the person there was asking, I have a question, and you made the comment about, she asked what happens, and you said when we do something like murder or offend someone, it leaves an impression in the subconscious. My question is, Moses murdered an impression, but it also affected him, would you say, not in the difficulties he had when he was asked to do what he was called to do, I can't do it, and so forth?
Moses had the right reaction, because when he killed the Egyptian, buried it in the sand, all right, this indicates that, you know, he knew he had to get out of there. And what he did was he went into the wilderness and started herding sheep, which is, you know, managing his thoughts. And sheep are these innocent creatures that, you know, you have to guide them and bring them back onto the path. And that is what prepared him to receive his calling. But we all have an experience like that, don't we? Isn't that our wake-up call? Is, you know, he had that reaction of you know, indignation at an injustice, because he saw one of his people being beaten by, you know, we see people who are roused to anger by social injustice all the time. And so he reacted and killed the Egyptian, but buried it in the sand. And that's what we do. We tend to not be able to process things, and so they get lodged in our subconscious. And if we don't go into the wilderness of our own being and start herding sheep, then we that buried Egyptian plays out in our decisions and in our actions that we take.
Well, what about the whole idea of going to tend sheep before you kill the Egyptian?
Well, it usually doesn't happen that way. You can always start the process of meditation, but usually there's a wake-up call, and that was his. You see, Moses was an Israelite who was raised in Egypt. So he was living in two worlds. And it wasn't until he was confronted by two Hebrews who were quarreling that he realized that you can't keep these things hidden, that you have to make a move. And so he made the right change, which was to go into Midian. And 40 years in Midian, 40 years of meditation, of herding sheep. And then when he was at Horeb, then, you know, after you've been going into the silence for a long time, you know, it doesn't have to be 40 years, but 40 years, the amount of time necessary to be open and receptive to God's presence and be able to overcome the challenges before they turn into those experiences that that live in our subconscious and continue to control us. Does that answer it, Bob?
Yeah. So while you're saying this, I guess we could really go into the silence for 40 minutes.
Yes, we could do that.
And while we're in the silence, would you say that that is equivalent to being in the wilderness, so that the Christ within us stirs all this up and brings us into a state of clarity?
Absolutely. Yeah, 40 is just a number. You know, it's just a number, but it means however long it takes in order to establish a foundation. And so in the case of Moses, who represents an understanding of the law, however long it takes to get into our head that there is this law of mind action that is always at work. And going into the silence allows us to transcend that law of mind action, which is the law of cause and effect. And
what you presented here tonight is quite different from the standard viewing of these 10 commandments. And would you say then that the law here that Moses is giving us is the spiritual law?
It is the spiritual law,
rather
but
than
you
a law of behavior, and you do this, you don't get this, you do this, you get that, and so forth. So I think traditionally, and I think most of us have grown up with the idea that these are 10 ways you're supposed to behave, and you do that, you'll be good, and you'll be rewarded. But what you've done here tonight, you've really gone beneath the surface and given and presented something that is, I would say, for many, many people, it might be shocking or I can't think of another word, shocking probably. What is she talking about? I never understood it this way.
yeah.
But I think in your presentation, and of course, we're looking at everything on an esoteric level. There is deeper meaning to all these things. But generally, I would say, I know my friends and my family that are traditional Christian living people do not look at these commandments like we talked about tonight.
I'm sure. I'm sure there are. And people can understand them at whatever level they are at. They're not bad as a standard of behavior. In fact, you know that when Moses came down from the mountain, he had the tablets God had written down. They're supposed to be written, quote, with the finger of God, which is an idiom in Aramaic, which means they're perfect. He found his brother, who was to be the high priest, had formed,
The illumined one.
yes, the illumined one, who had formed a golden calf out of what? The jewelry that they had taken with them from Egypt. and he was angry, so he threw the tablets down and broke them, which is actually what we're supposed to do. We break them down into whatever level we can understand. And so I agree with you. There are plenty of people who just blow these off as saying, oh yeah, don't steal, don't, a code of behavior. And then there are, in unity particularly, on the soul level, we're very concerned with thinking and feeling and that. But we look to Jesus and what he says, because remember, he said he did not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. And the way you fulfill it is by transcending it and allowing that law, that same law of God, to purify out the subconscious so that we can use our divine energy to bring more fulfillment to our own lives. Interesting that the punishment for those who, were clamoring for a golden calf was Moses burned the golden calf and then ground it into this fine powder, and it was mixed with water, and they had to drink it, which is saying, okay, you did this, and now the consequence is you have to appropriate this and integrate this into your own system. I thought it was a wonderful kind of comeback for those who had done it. And actually, Aaron had been the one in charge when Moses went up the mountain, and he said, now, if these people want anything, they should come to you. And, so there's a part of us that, makes golden calves too, and we then have to integrate that experience. But and use it as a stepping stone to move forward. But I find it totally fascinating to see different levels of this, and particularly the words of Jesus, to see what it really means to bring fulfillment to the law.
Yeah. Eleanor.
Yeah. Hello? Hello? Oops. His phone did this last week too.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
He's trying to call you.
Okay. Hello?
Why don't you let him call back? But,
Okay. Okay.
The yay, yay, nay, nay.
Yeah.
That, where does that come with the transmutating of thoughts and feelings? I mean, when you say,
Okay.
Does this serve me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, nay, nay. Well, I mean, it becomes a loop.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any questions, Linda?
Your call has been forwarded to an
Okay. Okay.
I was following what she was asking about the.
Yay, yay, nay, nay.
Yeah. Okay. We grow in discernment. All right. All of our faculties. Once we become aware of the Christ presence, we become aware of all of the faculties that support its expression. All right. The faculties: faith, strength, judgment, love. So this one was about judgment. All right. You make a negative judgment about someone. All right. So it's about judgment. So as your discernment grows, you say, yay, yay, or nay, nay. I am only willing to judge to the degree that I am willing to be judged. Okay? So I'll judge you if what I say to you, I could stand up to the same thing. Am I willing to? Okay, if I say something to you, I'm saying it to me. All right? And so, do I really want to say this to you and feel the impact myself?
Yay, yay, nay, nay.
Yeah. And so we say yes or no. Yes or no. Does this serve my spiritual growth or does it not? And I'm not saying that there is no appropriate expression for anger. Look at Moses broke the tablets, and just like it reminds me of when Jesus goes into the temple and overturns the tables of the money changers and the merchandisers. Okay? So it's not like you have to be, Miss Pollyanna. It's not that. It's like, how are you going to direct your anger? How are you going to direct it? you direct it at an action, but not to a person. Do you see the difference?
If somebody cuts you off in traffic, you don't go home and take it out on your husband or your child.
Yeah. You got, yes. Okay, because then you can feel how it has affected you. But Jesus, overturning the tables of the money changers, this is about hypocrisy. This is about, it's not on a personal level. It's on an impersonal level. And the same with the tablets. It's that he threw them down in anger because the people aren't able to accept pure spiritual principle. We don't know what was on those first tablets. And so they had to be broken down into these categories. So maybe we could say, okay, now let's see. Am I going to steal or am I going to lie? Or am I, that's it. Let's see, 8:22. We have time, and Bob, maybe your phone was not charged or something. So is anybody else going to call in? I'll talk a little more about this golden calf since we still have some time. If nobody has any questions about what we've covered so far. And so the breaking of the tablets, see, the revelation of the meaning of those tablets comes within. And then they have to be broken down. Your spiritual experience, it's difficult to transmit a spiritual experience to a people who are not where you are. He's been up on this mountaintop communing with God in this high state of consciousness. He comes down. He's totally radiant. And the people are afraid. I mean, the light is so bright. It's like the aura of someone who is enlightened in the moment. You come out of meditation. I notice this when I've taught people. They glow. There's more light coming from them. And that's what happened to Moses. So they come down, and he can't communicate that experience. And so the breaking of the tablets symbolizes that you have to break it down and say, okay, what this means is da 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 da. And of course, the words of Jesus were not at that time available. I'm just adding that to show you what it meant when Jesus said, I came not to destroy the law, but to fulfill it, to lift it to a spiritual level, so that we could use these 10 commandments as a kind of guideline for our own spiritual growth. And remember that an understanding of the law does not get you into the promised land. All right? Understanding an intellectual concept of God is not a direct experience of God, and everyone has to go up to that mountain himself or herself, receive the revelation himself or herself, and then give it out as you can to those who seek that kind of revelation. You can inspire people to do things, but you can't do it for them. So everyone has to do it for themselves. And so you can see how those people in the wilderness, it was Joshua. And of course you know that Joshua means God is salvation. Just like Jesus, God with us. Emmanuel, God with us. God is salvation. The new generation, that kind of the new thought who get to go into the promised land. It was Joshua and Caleb who had a new perspective on things, who led the Israelites into the promised land. And then the troubles aren't over. You think you go into a transcendent state once and it's all done? Oh, I don't think so. The challenges are always there. The challenges are always there, but you grow in the ability to meet them in such a way that you grow through them. Okay. Well, I guess no one else's phone is working or people are too shy. And so at this point, let's just close our eyes for a moment and give thanks for an awareness of the one power and one presence as we grow in that direct experience of it, feeling more good raining down into our lives. We are so grateful, and we do give thanks. Amen. And for those of you at home who would like to give a love offering, hold the love offering in your hands and bless it, knowing that the source is infinite. One source, one substance. One giver, one gift. As we give, so we receive, and in giving, we receive. And as we send our gifts forth, we bless them with our offertory statement: divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I give and all the good I receive. Would you like to join me in affirming that? Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I give and all the good I receive. So remember that next week, no class, but in the 3 Thursdays following, we will be broadcasting again, and we will continue right through Exodus into the Promised Land and talk about how that Promised Land gets unified. And so for tonight, that's all for tonight. Thank you so much for participating in our broadcast. The New Foundation is very grateful for all of you who tune in each Thursday. And so I wish you a blessed week, 2 weeks, and thank you. Have a good evening.